this section is going to cover by starting to look at how we can talk to the internet. The ways in which we can actually send requests out to the internet, handle the JSON we get back, and respond in the right way. So first things first, let's open Chrome. Now in Chrome, I have this API. So all it does is just gives us some post. And notice that we have these objects that look like dictionaries. So just look at what we see here. We see first this syntax that should resemble kind of an array. And then we see these curly braces and then these key value pairs. This should look very familiar to what we know inside of Swift, if you think of an array and then a dictionary. This is called JSON. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is typically a type of response you can expect on the internet. So we go to this route. So we could actually go to HTTPS and we get this JSON response. So we send off a request and we get this response. So let's first go into our code. And if we remember, we have this very simple app. All it's doing is just showing the author, the content, and the date. Now, we're going to start to build this into our application. So the first thing we should think about doing is writing a method. So let's write a method called fetchPost. Very, very simple method. Now we know that we have a URL we can go to. Now this URL is this value here. And if we think about what we know about Swift, everything happens to be an object. We have a ton of types. We have these structures, these classes, and we know we tend to interact with things using these types. So as you can imagine, there's a type for a URL. So we're going to create a URL using our URL string. Now you will notice that this is an optional. So let's unwrap it. And so now that we have our URL, we need to take this a bit further. We need to actually create a request. So the first thing we have to do here is create a session. So let's create a session. We're going to use the URLSession class, and we're going to give it a configuration. Now there's several configurations we can use. We can use default, we can use ephemeral. Let's just use ephemeral. As you notice, it has no persistent storage, no caching, cookies, or credentials, whereas default just really gives you just like the default one that gives you a little bit more configuration. So now that we have our session, the session object has the ability to create a data task. Now notice this data task takes a URL and then gives you a completion handler. It retrieves the contents of the specified URL, then calls a handler upon completion. So we're going to pass it the URL. And anytime you see this in Xcode, generally, if you double click, it'll actually open up for you. When I say open up, all it's doing is it's changing the syntax slightly. So notice completion takes a parameter, and this syntax right here is just saying that this is a function that takes 3 methods and returns nothing. And so if we double click, there's some nice syntactic sugar that looks like this. And so this is just an anonymous function that takes the same thing. Data, response, error. Don't worry, we're going to actually look at that exact functionality in a little bit. So in case that wasn't super clear on how we were able to do that, you'll actually see me write a completion handler of my own. So let's actually set this to being a variable. So let data task. And the reason we're assigning this a variable, I want you to notice something. Data task has a resume method on it. Now, why does it have a resume method? If you look up the API documentation, they tell you that this data task starts off in a suspended state. So to actually get it to go to the internet, you have to call resume. If you don't, nothing will actually happen. Now, if we call our method, and what I want us to take a look at is let's print the response. We want to verify that we're able to actually get some kind of response. So we're not handling our data just yet. What we just want to see is if we get a response. Now, presumably, if this doesn't work, we should get back like a 4 for something else. Now, notice we get a status 200. What does that mean for us? It's letting us know that our request actually went to the internet. It went to /post, and we've gotten back some information. Now, notice something actually really cool. In the request, the headers, it actually tells us that we got back JSON. So what have we seen so far? We were able to make a request. We were able to get it to go to the API. We made a session by the ephemeral configuration. We sent out a session, and we were able to see the response. Let's pause here for now in this video.